Hello and welcome to today's live stream. So it's a little bit different today because we're doing this at 4:30 rather than 2 p.m. But same stuff's going on. So we're going to be doing a maths lesson today. So welcome to everybody on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining me. Today we're going to be looking at how to solve quadratic equations. So please like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and please consider joining the Patreon using the link below in the description. On the Patreon, you'll be able to see today's full lesson. So for those on YouTube, we'll be going over how to solve quadratics with the 3 different methods. But for Patreon, we will also be looking at a bespoke worksheet that I've made specifically for this lesson. So if you are already on Patreon, that worksheet should be below this video here. It's quite a fun one. I'll just briefly show you now what it looks like. So you'll be acting as a game designer, trying to work out the values of certain objects within the game, where they might be. So it's trying to put the whole concept of solving quadratics into a real world, well, not actually a real world, but into a task that reflects something that you might do as a job in the real world, okay, as a game designer. So okay, everybody on YouTube, thank you for joining. We're going to get started now. So if everyone on YouTube, everyone on Patreon, please grab a notebook and a pen, and we're going to start making some notes now. Just to note, that worksheet I've just showed everybody on Patreon can be downloaded with the link below this stream or below this recording, so please do that now. Okay, so let's have a think, first of all, about what quadratic equations are. So if we just put quadratic equations as our title, and it is the 15th of June today for me, but obviously put whatever date it is for you. It's good to keep track of what work you're doing when, so that you can look back at your work if you need to. Okay, so essentially a quadratic graph is any graph where the equation has a squared value in it. So we haven't actually looked at straight line graphs yet, but we have looked at linear equations. Now, the important thing to note is that equations and lines on graphs, they coexist with each other, and one reflects the other. So you can note down a line graph using an equation. And if you're doing a quadratic equation where it has a squared value, then I'm just going to show you now what that might look like on a graph, and so therefore what values we're actually looking for. So let's say, for example, I'll do this with my pen. I think it would be easier if I had the equation x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so a lot of your quadratic equations might look like this. Now, if this was to be sketched on a graph, let's imagine that I can do this straight up. It looks a bit wonky there, but you can imagine a graph with a y-axis and an x-axis. A quadratic graph will always look a little bit like this, okay? It will look like a bell shape, a parabola, a curve, okay? And the values that we're trying to find when we're solving these equations here, so what we're looking for are values of x. We're trying to find, I'm just going to try and get that less wonky, we're trying to find these values here, and that's because if you look at this equation, it says equals 0. Now if we think about any line equation we write down, again, this isn't actually something we've covered yet, but generally speaking, the equation for a line is noted by y equals mx plus c. Don't worry about these m and the c, we'll come back to that at a later date. But y tends to sit on its own on one side of the equation when we write down line graphs. And then with a quadratic, it would be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, these a, b's and c's, just representing the coefficients. So when y is 0, as it is here, that would obviously be at this point in the axis when y is at its lowest point. And so we're looking for the 2 places where x crosses, or sorry, where the line crosses the x-axis. And I'm telling you this now purely really for those on Patreon, because it will be relevant to the exercise we'll do later in the worksheet. But it's about basically, where does that graph across the x-axis, so the horizontal axis, that's what the two x values will tell us. So we have been doing linear solving of equations. So let's say I had 3x plus 4 equals 28. Now we know from the lesson last time that to do this, we take away 4, we end up with 3x equals 24, and then we divide by the 3, and we end up with x equals 8. So what we've done is we've solved for x. But with a quadratic, when you have a squared value as well, there are two values for x. Similarly, if you had a cubic equation where there'd be an x cubed, there would be 3 values for x. So it's always however many powers, whatever the highest power is in an equation, it tells you how many possible values for that variable there is. So for quadratic equations, we are always looking for 2 different values. So if I was to just perhaps summarize some of that in a note form for you to note down, I might say quadratic equations have a squared variable letter. It is often x, but sometimes it's noted by other letters, and can be solved when the other side of the equals sign is 0, as we are trying to find the values of x when y is 0 on a quadratic graph. Ooh. Okay. This is just kind of to get you to understand a little bit of the theory behind it. You can, of course, just learn how to do it, and that's fine. You get all the marks. But I think understanding the theory actually helps you answer questions quicker, because you don't have to do too much thinking about why you're trying to do something. It kind of making sure that you understand those reasons why is really important. Okay. So if you can just note that down, and then I'm going to show you how we might solve these equations. I'm just going to give you a minute now to just kind of write that down, and then we shall get going. Okay, so the first method we're going to employ is factorisation. Now we have done some factorising before when we've looked at algebra, but this was linear factorising. So let's say, for example, I had 4x plus 8, and I wanted to factorise that. What I'm looking for when I factorise like that is I'm looking for a common factor in both of those terms. So I'm looking at 4x and 8. I notice they both have 4 in common. So 4 would come outside of a bracket, and inside I would put the values that have been divided by the 4 inside the bracket. So x plus 2. Okay. When you're factorising quadratics, what you actually end up with is 2 sets of brackets rather than a number outside or a value outside and then a bracket. So if I gave you an example, let's say I had x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so in order to factorise this, I look first at my x squared value, and I look at my coefficient. Now, a question is never going to give you a coefficient, and by coefficient, I mean the number in front of the x squared. In this case, it's technically 1, although we don't ever note that 1 down. A question is never going to give you a number that isn't 1 or a prime number. So there's never going to be multiple options for how you multiply together to create that x squared. So what I mean by that is, if as this is 1, if we had 2 sets of brackets, if you imagine multiplying out those sets of brackets, you'd go the first term times the first term times the second term here, second term times first term, second term times second term. So the first term is going to come from the first term here times by the first term here, which has to be x and x, because there's no other option to get x squared when you multiply, because it's 1. If this happened to be 2x, then it would be 2x and x. Now, it's never going to give you a number that isn't prime or isn't 1, so that there will never be two different ways that it could be multiplied. It will always be either just an x and an x, or it will be the number and then an x. So if it was 3x, it would be 3x and then an x. It would never be 6, for example, because it's not prime. Okay, so we know that that's the first thing, x times x. Now, what we've got to do here is work out what goes in the other parts of the brackets in order for it to multiply out to become x squared plus 3x plus 2. So when the coefficient is 1, as in there's nothing in front of it, the quickest method for this is to look at your number in front of x and then your number here. And what you're looking for are a pair of numbers where if you multiply them together, you get this number. And if you add them together, you get this number. So what numbers when you add get 3, and what numbers when you multiply get 2? And the answer is 1 and 2. So we put 1 in one of them and 2 in the other. And there we have factorised it. Now, the reason we are factorising it is because if you think about it, what we've got here is a value in a bracket times another value in a bracket is giving us 0. So logically speaking, the only way to get 0 from a multiplication is if one of the values in the multiplication is 0. So that means the first bracket has to equal 0, or the second bracket has to equal 0. So what we've got to do is look at the values of x to make each of those brackets 0. So for that first bracket, in order for x plus 1 to equal 0, x must be minus 1. And in the second bracket, in order for x plus 2 to equal 0, x must be minus 2. And there you have it. I've solved it. I've got my two values of x. Okay, so that's not easy. That's quite complicated. But I'm going to leave that there. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to write a few more. So I'll write 2 more for you to have a go at, and then I'll go through them with you. Do rewind if you're watching a recording. Make use of the fact that you can rewind it and have a go in your own time. Basically, take your time with this because it is tricky. Okay, so I'm going to have x squared plus 5x plus 6. I'm going to stretch you on this one here. I'm going to add some negatives in, so you've really got to think about this. So x squared plus 3x minus 28 equals 0. Okay, so you got to think about which value is going to be negative in order for it to add to make 3 and multiply to make minus 28. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a few minutes on that on your own, and then I will come back and go through those with you. Okay, right, so I'm just going to go through these now. So this first one, I'm actually going to show how this multiplies out as well, because perhaps I didn't show you exactly why we were going for these two multiplied and these two this one added. So for this one, it's going to be x plus 2 and then x plus 3. Now the reason for that is if I actually multiply these brackets out, I have x times x, which is x squared, x times 3, which is 3x, 2 times x, which is 2x, and then 2 times 3, which is 6, which will simplify down to this. So it becomes x squared plus 5x plus 6. So essentially, this here is the same thing as this. It's just another way of writing it down. But then if we look at this to solve it, then x is either going to be minus 2 or x is going to be minus 3. Right, now for this one, again, we start with our x at the front. Now, the two values that are going to make this work are going to be minus 4 and 7. Because minus 4 times 7 is minus 28, but minus 7x plus minus 4x is 3x. Okay, so that means that x is either going to be minus 7 or x is going to be 4, because it would need to be 4 here to make that 0. Okay, good. Right, I'm going to show you an example of when the coefficient of x squared is not 1, so if it's another prime number. I'm just going to show you how that works, and I'll give you one to have a go at. So let's say we have 2x squared plus 4x plus hang on, got to make this work. $1.5. Okay, I didn't do a very good example there. In fact, I'm not going to do that one because we don't want to include decimals. Let's have this one be 5. 5x. And then plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so what's going to happen here is the beginning of one of these brackets is 2x and the other one is x. So that's the only option is 2x squared. It's a prime number, so you can't have any other factors other than 1 and 2. Now, why this complicates things is we're no longer looking at what two numbers add to make 5, because what's going to happen is whatever value goes here, when it gets multiplied by the 2x, it's going to be double what it is there when it finally adds. So it's a little bit trial and error, this one. The first thing you do is you look at this number and you think, well, what are the factors of that number? Because they still have to multiply to make that final number. And obviously with 2, the only option is 1 and 2 again. So we've got to decide, does 2 go here or does 2 go here? So if 2 went here, it would end up multiplying by x, so we'd have 2x, and then 1 would be here, so we'd multiply by that, by 2, and that would be 2x. So that would add to be 4x. So 2 actually has to go here, because that would multiply out correctly. So we'd end up with 2x squared, 4x, plus x, which gets us 5x, plus 2. Yeah? Okay, now in order for this to be 0, we've got to look at this one. X actually has to be minus 1.5. Sorry, minus 0.5. Because minus 0.5 times 2 is minus 1, and then add 1. So what you've got to do is make this negative and then divide by whatever number is here. So x is going to be minus 0.5, or, as it is here, x can be minus 2. Okay? Right, I'm going to give you one to do on your own, and then we'll move on. So 3x squared plus 10x plus 8 equals 0. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a minute now to have a go at that, and then I'll go through it with you. Okay, if you've not had enough time, please feel free to rewind and go over that again. Okay, so this one is going to be 3x at the front, x here. And then, so the factors of 8 are going to be 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. I reckon it's probably going to be 2 and 4. So 2 goes here, we get 3x times 2, which is 6x. And then x times 4 is 4x, so that works. So it'd be plus 4 here and plus 2 here. So that means for this first bracket, for that to be 0, x has to equal minus 4 over 3. And then for this one, it would be minus 2. Okay. Right, we're going to swiftly move on to the next method, which is the quadratic root formula. So I'm going to write it down, but do bear in mind that you should get it. I'm pretty sure all exam boards give it in the exam. You should get it on your formula sheet anyway, so I don't think it's something you need to remember. But it might be worth remembering it because it does save time flicking back through the paper when you come to it. So I'll write down what the formula is and then I'll explain how it works. So the formula is this. So it's minus b plus or minus, make that a bit clearer, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, so you might be wondering what all those a, b's and c's are about. But essentially, if I just wrote an equation, so if I had x squared plus 4x plus 7, my a is the coefficient here, my b is the coefficient here, and my c is the coefficient here. So it's really important to write the equation in this order. Don't go putting the 4x first because you'd confuse things with this root formula. The highest power value of the variable goes first and then in descending order. So a here is 1 because that just represents 1, b is 4, and c is 7. So if I input this into the formula, I'd have minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 7 all over 2, because it's 2 times 1. And then I pop that in my calculator. Notice here we've got plus or minus. That allows us to have the two different values. So the first time I put it in the calculator, I might do plus, and the second time I'll do minus. I'll get two different values. So I'm going to try and do that now, show you, but the calculator I've got on my computer is a little bit rubbish. So sometimes it's not very good at long equations like this. But I will do my best. I'm going to move it over here. There we go. But I have this trusty scientific calculator. So if you've got one of these, absolutely use this. I will test it on here to see if what I'm typing in there is correct as well. So let's have a go at writing this in then. So I'm going to start with some brackets. I think as many brackets as possible is always good for inserting calculations. Oh, it's not going to let me do it, is it? This is a rubbish calculator. Right, I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to try and put this right up to the camera. I did have a Casio on the computer, but I don't have it anymore. So minus 4 plus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 7 all over 2. Okay. A bit glary. I think you can see that. Sort of. Okay. I'll try and do that again in a minute while you're having a go at one. But if I go equals, I have a maths error, which possibly means that I've written down an equation that doesn't exist. So I'm going to change that 7 to a 3. Yeah, okay. So if we change that 7 to a 3, I'll do that now. That happens when you're just making up equations because not all equations actually would work on a graph. So that means that x can either be minus 1, or x can be, now what I've got to do is I've got to change that plus at the beginning to a minus to get the other value, and it's going to be minus 3. Okay, right, so let me give you another one. I'm hoping it will work. So let's say we have 2x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so I'd like you to have a go at that using the quadratic root formula, and I'm going to try and look on my calculator to see if I can get this working to show you another example. Okay, so I've not been able to do that. So I'm just going to do it on this calculator again. So I'm just going to show you what values of A, B, and C I'd have here. So I'd have A, B, C. Now notice that minus is going to make a difference. So I'm going to have minus 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 2 times minus 1 over 4. I'm going to tap that in the calculator. So I'm going to have, you can see it from there, I'm going to go on the fraction, and then I'm going to do minus 2 plus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 2 times minus 1 over 4. And then as a decimal, I'm going to do it to 2 decimal places. So that's going to be x equals 0.37, or x equals, so I'm going to change that to a negative, minus 1.37. Okay, lovely. Right, so obviously that would only ever be on a calculator paper. The factorisation method can be on a non-calculator. Bear in mind, some questions will just ask you to solve an equation, and then you can choose your method, but some will specify the type of method that you use, so it's important to know all of them. So the other one is something called completing the square. So we'll just look at that now. So completing the square. Okay, so this one, let's say I had x squared plus 4x plus 5 equals 0. So the way this works is we take the first two terms and we make sure that there is no coefficient in front of x squared. So when there is other than 1, that changes things slightly, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But if the coefficient in front of x squared is 1, then all we do is we look at this second coefficient in front of x and we half it, and we write a bracket like this. So we do x plus 2, because that's half of 4, and we do that all squared. We then multiply that out to see what that gives us. So this is essentially the same as saying x plus 2 times x plus 2. So when you multiply that out, you get x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4, which will of course simplify down to x squared plus 4x plus 4. Now what you do is you compare what we've got here to what we had at the beginning, including the 5. The only difference between this and this is that we've taken away 1. We've added 1. So to get from that 4 to the 5, we add 1. So then we rewrite the completing the square as x plus 2 all squared plus 1 equals 0. Okay, and then we solve it like this. So it's a little bit like a linear solving now. We're going to get rid of that 1 first, so we'll take away 1 from both sides. So we end up with x plus 2 all squared equals minus 1. We're then going to square root both sides. So we end up with x plus 2 equals the square root of minus 1, which is actually an impossibility. So I've obviously written another graph here that doesn't exist, but you'll get the idea of the completing the square. And then I'm going to take away 2. So x equals the square root of minus 1, which it would never be. It would never be a negative here. Imagine this was the other way around. And then minus 2. Now bear in mind, if that was a positive number, the square root can be plus or minus, because obviously a minus number will square to make a positive. So let's say, for example, so this is a bit of a rubbish example I've given you there because it doesn't quite work, but if it was like plus or minus the square root of 3 minus 2, you'd have two different values here. You'd have, or if I do it as a actual square number, so if I had plus or minus the square root of 4, then it would be either 2 minus 2, which is 0, or it would be minus 2 minus 2, which is minus 4, as your answers. Okay, but obviously most of these are going to be decimalized. I'll do one more and try and make it work this time. So let's say I have x squared plus 5x minus 36 equals 0. So I go x plus 2.5, because I've halved that second one, all squared. I'm going to multiply that out. That will multiply out to be x squared plus 5x plus 6.25. So the difference between 6.25 and 36 is minus 42.5. So it's going to be x plus 2.5 squared minus 42.5 equals 0. So to solve this, I'm going to add 42.5 to both sides. So it'll be x plus 2.5 all squared equals 42.5. Square root both sides. So x plus 2.5 equals a square root of 42.5, or plus or minus a square root. And then take away 2.5. So x equals plus or minus 42.5 minus 2.5. So if I pop that in the calculator, so the square root of 42.5 take away 2.5 is about 4.02. And then to make that negative, it's minus 9.02. Okay. So let me give you one of those to have a go at, and then we will be more or less done. So let's say we had x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. So have a go at solving that with completing the square. Okay, so if you've not had enough time, again, make sure you rewind. But it's going to start with x plus 4, because that's half of 8, all squared. And we'll multiply that out. So that's x squared plus 8x plus 16. And then we look at the difference between that and this, and it's minus 4. So we've got x plus 4 all squared minus 4 equals 0. So we rearrange this. We're going to add 4 to both sides. So x plus 4 all squared equals 4. Square root. So x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 4. And then minus 4, so x equals plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 4, which is a nice one because we can do this without a calculator. So it's either going to be 2 minus 4, which is minus 2, or it's going to be minus 2 minus 4, which is minus 6. Those are our two values of x. Okay, so last thing, I'm just going to show you how this works with values where the coefficient of x squared is not 1. So here's an example. So when it is 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. First thing we do is we look at these first two values. And what we've got to do is divide them so that the coefficient of x squared is 1 again. So it's going to be 2 on the outside, x squared plus 1.5x. In fact, what I'm going to do is write that as a fraction because I think it'll be easier to keep track of. So 3 over 2x. I'm then going to use that here to do the completing the square, but I'm going to keep the 2 there. So 2 brackets x plus 3 over 4, because I've then got to half that value all squared. And then I'm going to multiply that out. So once I've multiplied that out, I end up with 2 times x plus 3 over 2x plus 9 over 16. I'll multiply everything by the 2, so I end up with 2x plus 3x plus 18 over 16. Now 18 over 16 is actually about 1.125. I'm going to compare that to my original. So to get from 1.125 to minus 5, I've got to minus 6.125. So I'm going to write this now from here. It's going to be 2 times x plus 3 over 4 all squared minus 6.125 equals 0. Then I'll rearrange it. So plus 6.125. So 2 times x plus 3 over 4 all squared equals 6.125. Divide that by 2. So x plus 3 over 4 all squared equals 3.0625. Then we'll square root it. So x equals x plus 3 over 4 equals the square root of 3.0625. And then x equals, keep that plus or minus the square root of 3.0625, take away 3 over 4. And if we pop that through the calculator, we get 1, or we get, and I haven't actually worked the other one, negative, so minus 3.0625 minus 0.75 is minus 2.5. And there you have it. Okay, well done everyone. Bear in mind that is grade 9 stuff there, so if you were a bit confused, we will return to it at a later date when we do practice exams. But hopefully you've got that there to go back over as and when you need. So thank you everybody on YouTube for joining. I know that was a really tough lesson today, but well done for getting through it. Please like, comment and subscribe so I can continue doing these lessons for you, and consider joining the Patreon, where we'll now be consolidating all that we've just done with a bespoke worksheet, using all of those different techniques. So the link is in the description below. You can watch this as a recording later and also watch all of my previous lessons as well. But thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you next time.